Naming conventions and variable types in Java. We're going to talk about the introduction of how you name your variables and what variable types that we actually have and how we name our classes, things of that sort. Unlike some languages, if you've programmed in other languages before, Java is very specific on how you name things. Okay, it's not flexible, and so you must follow the rules for that. And there's a good reason for that. It's not just me being picky, it's that every Java programmer does that. And part of the reason for that is a lot of times when you're out there in the real world, if there is such a place, you're working in teams. And you want to have the same conventions for that team as you go through. So it actually goes all the way to having these conventions for all Java programmers. So I don't want your programs to look bad to other people. So we want to talk about naming conventions, and then we're also going to talk about variable types. These are two things that are real critical as we first start. Naming conventions, all right? In Eclipse, we have these over here we've talked about in a previous movie, which are the projects. This is an Eclipse thing. You can name it whatever you want. Now, having said that, what you'll see is a lot of times I will do mine mod 1, mod 2, mod 3, mod 4, quizzes, projects, things of that sort. Just like your folder system in Windows or Macs or whatever, however you do that. So that doesn't matter what you name those, but I suggest you name them something so that you can find your stuff later as you go through. All right, underneath the project is the package. The package is a Java thing. This gets carried along with your jar files, so those must be named correctly. Now, I mentioned previously, I think that the real standard for that is that you use your namespace backwards. We want individual namespaces for everybody in the world. So mine should be edu.virginiawestern.dwolf.mod1 or edu.virginiawestern.dwolf.dwolf.mod1. Way too long to do that, and that doesn't help me knowing who you are. So in this class and this class only, the convention must be, and this is real critical you do that you name your packages, first letter, first name, last name, whatever module it is, the ones you're turning into me. And that again is critical because what happens is I bring in all of yours to grade at once, 40 of you, and I will have this whole list of them down here that's dwolf mod 1, J Smith mod 1, S Miller mod 1, whatever, okay, and then I know whose belongs to who. So please do that. Now, to remind you, how do you do that? If you create a project, let's create a new project. So new, Java project, okay, and I'm going to call this practice. Remember, it does not matter what you name this because this is up to you as far as organization in your Eclipse itself. If you get something like that, just say finish. That's cool. Okay, so there it is. All right, when you actually do it. So now I have 3 Java projects. Under here, I have the language. Okay, once I click on this, I can pick this, or I can do File, New, Package, Project, Package, Class. So now I'm putting in a package. Okay, and notice it's kind of suggesting you name it the same thing. Okay, again, if this was something I was going to turn into my teacher, I'd make sure I named it dwolf mod 1, or mod 2, or mod 3. Now you might say, well, gee, I already have one named dwolf mod 1, but notice you can do that as long as they're under different projects. Okay, now I want to name a class. I want to put a class in here, all right? And so my class name, when you name classes in Java, there are rules in your book, you can look through those, but let's just use letters. I will tell you what I want you to name the classes because then obviously I can find the program that I'm looking for when you actually go through and do that. Okay, and so what you typically name it is words. If there's more than one word, you capitalize every word, okay? And so if I wanted a program called test, I would just call it test with a capital T, and that T must be capitalized. I want it to run, so I put that check mark. We'll see in mod 2 when we might not want a program to run, but for mod 1, we always put in that check mark and say finish. So I've now got one Java program underneath that package in that project. Okay, if I click here and I put in, excuse me, another class, okay, my favorite things. So I can have as many classes as I want under a given package. We just want to make sure we name them correctly. And notice what happens when I do that. It gets named here, has to match. One of the rules of Java is that if you have a class named My Favorite Things, it must be in a myfavorithings.java file. And again, Eclipse will take care of that for you, so you don't need to worry about it too much as you go through. All right, so that's naming classes itself as you go through. Now, let's start looking at some code here. Notice the first line of code always is what package it's in. Eclipse did that for you. This is dwolfmod1, so it's package dwolfmod1. The next thing is the name of the actual class. You must have public. We'll talk about what all these words are. Class, class name, brace, brace. Java uses lots of braces. Here's a nice little thing in Eclipse. If you click to the right of any brace, it'll show you the matching brace. Nice software. I think you're going to grow to love Eclipse if you get used to it. Next thing you note is a blank space. Java is white space insensitive. Leave blank spaces for easier reading as you go through. Next thing you note is the indentation. Again, Eclipse did it for you, but this is a method. This is called a method. We'll work with methods a lot. But that should be indented. Notice the code inside the method's indented even further. Java will take care of all that for you as you go through and do that. Now, all the terms in here we don't need to worry about, but that must be exactly what it looks like for Java to start. You will see that Java classes have many methods in them, and the Java, it doesn't matter what order they're in, Java always looks for public static void main string args for the program to run. // notice that is a comment. Okay, that means everything from there to the end of the line is ignored. Okay, and Eclipse put that in for me. It says to do, gives you something you need to do. It's an auto-generated method stub. You need to put your code right here as you go through and do that. Okay, and so right there is where the code is going to go as you go through and do that. All right, we can have multiple methods. We'll see how that all works out as we go through. All right, so next thing I want to talk about, since we've got the naming of that, is variables. What is a variable? A variable in Java is just a hunk of memory. There's two different types of variables, reference and primitives, all right? And we're talking right here about primitive. What's a primitive variable or a primitive data type? Okay, Java is a strong typed language. That means every time you want to store some data, you've got to tell Java what type of data it is so it knows how big of a hunk of memory to go get to store that data. There are 8 primitive types in Java, 8. We're going to use 4, and you must use the 4 I tell you to. And there's reasons why. Okay, these are great questions to put in the discussion forum. I hope we have a really active discussion forum this semester. Normally I do. Last semester I didn't for some reason. There is no dumb question. The only dumb question is the one not asked. Okay, so let's get that discussion forum really active as you go through and do that. Put out questions that will not only help you, but can help your classmates as you go through and do that. So there are 8 primitive types in Java, only 4 of which we will use. All right, we are going to use int, double, boolean, and char, C-H-A-R. Okay, let's talk about what those are. I, at times, want to store whole numbers, like age, okay, or something of that sort. All right, when you define a variable in Java, you give it a data type, you give it a variable name, which we're going to talk about with the variable names and how to name variables as we go through and do that. And then eventually it's going to have a value. It may not have one at the beginning, but it can. So our first data type we're getting introduced is to int. Notice some of these words are purple. I didn't mention that. Those are reserved words. Those are words that Java already knows. Java already knows what these words are. It's part of the language itself. So int says, I want to put a whole number in there. All right, now I need to name the variable. Used to be memory was expensive. We used to name our variables X, Y, Z. You cannot do that in this class. Okay, we need programs that are self-documenting. What does that mean? That means the variable names tell you, give you an indication of what's being stored there. I will put my age in here, and I'm not going to tell you what my age is, but that's okay. But I do want you to see the way I actually named my variables. Okay, next rule. Remember classes, every word's capitalized. Variables, every word except the first one is capitalized. Sometimes called camel case because it kind of looks like a camel. It's got a hump kind of in the middle there. Okay, you must name your variables that way. Okay, so I declared a variable. That's what that line 7 is. It's declaring a variable. It's telling Java to go get a piece of memory that's big enough for an integer, because I'm going to store some data there. Now, interestingly, unlike any other language, it doesn't matter if you're on an Android cell phone or a mainframe, the size of an int is always the same. That makes the code transportable between different platforms, which is really pretty interesting as we go through. All right, now I'd like to, I just declared a variable, I would like to assign a value to it. Notice everything ends in a semicolon. You'll get used to that. So this is a variable declaration. Okay, and this is a variable assignment. All right, now you can actually do both in one. So if you do int numbers equals 7. I actually have 7 birds in my house. If you can believe that, you saw the pictures on the front page of Canvas. There you go. All right, and so that's declaring it and assigning it in the same line of code, and you can do that. Notice again, blank spaces are nice. Notice I put spaces here. Java is white space insensitive, and so you can put spaces in, okay, to make things a little bit nicer. Notice again my comments. You should comment your code, okay? It will help you in the future when you go back and look at it, but will also help you as you're coding and going through when you do that. So whole numbers, integers, that's number 1, okay? Second type, double. If you have a number that happens to have a decimal in it, okay, when you do that. Notice in this case, I did not capitalize it because there was only one word. So if there's more than one word, so notice that's not really a word, but it's kind of like a word, okay? You capitalize everything but the first one. And notice those funny things come up. We'll talk about what that is later as we go through, okay, when you actually do that. But that one, again, only one word, so make it small. Notice it is a double, so it can have a decimal on it. Notice what happens up here if I do numbers equals 2.3. Can't have 2.3 birds, I don't think. And Java is going to come back and give you an error message. Now, again, you're going to love Eclipse. Don't curse at these reds, read them. You'll get really good at reading error messages. Get started early, make sure you read them. It says, type mismatch cannot convert from a double to an int. Type mismatch cannot convert to a double to an int. You put a double here. You put a decimal on here. But you told me you're going to only have a whole number. Okay, that's called a compile time error. That means the program's not going to run until you fix them. You curse at compile time errors, but they're wonderful because it tells you what the problem is and you can fix everything, okay, before the program runs. So I know that's not legal. I'll just comment it out. Okay. Now, I'm again neurotically Control-S, Control-S, Control-S to save all the difference I make. So second data type we have, okay, is a double. Okay, it can have decimals in it. Now, it doesn't have to have a decimal. I can change the, and you can also change the value. Okay, I'm going to change the value of salary. I just got a raise to 15 bucks an hour. Isn't that great? And notice Java will let you put an integer in for salary. That's called an implicit casting. How's that for a big term, huh? Implicit casting. Java says, well, you gave me an int, and I was supposed to have a decimal on it, but I'll just assume that's 15.00. And if I actually print it out, it will actually print out 15.0, even though I didn't put the 0.0 in there as you go through. So second data type, whole numbers. First data type, whole numbers. Second data type, double, for numbers with decimals. Third data type we're going to talk about, okay? Booleans, true, false. Notice again, these are turning up purple because Java knows what these words are when you do that, okay? Answer equals true. Okay, so I have defined a variable called answer and assigned it the value true. That's what you want to look at that line. Java is case sensitive, so you cannot do this. I was going to come back and say false cannot be resolved to a variable. You're going, whoa, what does that mean? It doesn't even know what that word is. Notice it's not. Notice that's purple. That's not. Okay, it doesn't even know what that word is. It sees this, it says, I don't know where it is, so it must be a variable, okay? But I don't know any variable you've defined because Java is strong typed. You got to define your variables, okay? So it's really confused right here when you do that. Notice you can change the value of a variable, so I could change it from true to false, but it's case sensitive. Java is case sensitive. Notice that is purple. If I do this, it turns black. That's not what I want. Okay, make certain that these names have small letters. There is such a thing. No, you might say, well, why didn't I get an error message there? There is such a thing as Boolean in Java we'll talk about later. You don't want to be using capitals on these. Please don't. Okay, that's the third one. Okay, fourth one, CHAR. We probably won't use it as much. That is a single key press. Okay, single key press. And so if I want to say CHAR grade equals S for Southmore, how's that? I don't know, something like that. Okay, notice that these are called the literal types, the literal data, the actual data I put in there, that's literally the number 7, 12, true. Single quotes around characters. Those are the only 4, these are the primitive data types as we go through and do that. Okay, and when I write code, a lot of times what I will do is we'll do some coding, and then I'll make sure that I save the jar file for you when you get done. Okay, so the primitive types in Java, there are 4 that we'll use. Get used to doing them as you go through. Okay, reference data types. There are an infinite, how's that, number in Java. You might say, whoa, how can there be an infinite number? Well, because you can create your own, and you can name yours whatever you want. But the only one can't type today, huh? The only ones we'll use in mod 1 are string and system. Now, next thing to note, and we'll describe this as we go through, okay, reference data types are classes. So name them like we do classes. Remember, classes have to be named so they start with a capital letter. So we got string and we got system. Now in reality, the reference data types, there are 2 types of them. There's ones Java has defined, okay? Since Java supplies some, and Java supplies them, applies in the language itself, and we can write our own, okay? Which we'll start looking at right in mod 2. Okay, but for in mod 1, we're going to be looking at string and system. String is a Java data type, okay? And it starts with a capital S, and notice it's not purple. And part of the reason why it's not purple is because it is in the language. It's not built into the actual Java language itself. It's actually in the Java libraries and the Java things that it provides for you, okay? And when you actually declare and initialize strings, you use double quotes. So characters get single quotes, strings get double quotes. Okay, when you actually do that. And again, we could have initialized and then declared and then initialized, or we can put it all in one line as we go through and do that. Now, Java again is a little neurotic. I'm getting all these little yellow light bulbs here. Ignore them. It's essentially saying, well, you wrote this thing, you didn't use it. Okay, so if I hover over that, the value of the local variable grade is not used. Well, that's all right. Doesn't matter. Make sure you get rid of all the reds. It won't run with the reds. Okay, but you can ignore those as you go through. All right, now, I'd like to print some of this stuff out as we go through. So those are really variables that we're going to talk about in mod 1. Okay, how do you print something out to the console? And this is the console down here. Notice again, down here. Okay, system.out.print. Oopsie, I got to have a dot. You'll be writing system.out.println so often, I'm going to give you a shortcut for doing that, okay? And when this thing comes up, it gets a little in your way sometimes. And so what you want to do is hi, how are you, Mike? Okay, it gets in your way sometimes, and so what you want to do is to just ignore those as you go through. Okay, system.out.println, okay, and what I can do is I'm just doing a recording, Mike. We're not on session yet. Somebody, okay, and so hang on one second. There we go. I can mute him. All right, so sys.print line, and what I can do is I can print stuff out. So sys.print line will print stuff out for you. Now I can just print out name, and we'll see what it comes out looking like here in a minute when I get there. So I can just system.print line name, which works fine. Okay, I can also do a bunch of them together in one line. Now here's another neat shortcut in Eclipse. Okay, sys.print line you write so often. If you just do sys out and then hold down the control and hit the space, it will write systems.out.print line for you. Okay, and then what you can do with that is you can just say something, and you can concatenate these together. Concatenate means to put them together. And so what you can do is you could say name plus is, and we'll get used to doing this, plus age plus years old, okay, and has a salary of, and notice, we'll talk about this in a minute, salary, there you go. Okay, cool, there you go. All right, now notice as I'm typing, I may want more room. If you double click here, it'll make it full screen. If you double click again, it'll make it back normal screen. A lot of times I'll go full screen when I'm typing it. All right, next thing to note. Age cannot be resolved to a variable. Notice Java doesn't like that because I wrote age here, but I really called it my age up here, so I can change that. There you go. All right. And the next thing is look very carefully at line 33. All right. I've got a space on either side of this because what I want it to say is Diane space is space 23 space years old and has a salary of. So notice how I put those spaces there. These spaces out here don't matter. It just makes it easier to read. But any spaces inside the quotes actually do matter. So Control S to save it. Go back to normal size. Right click. Run as Java application. There you go. And so notice the first one came out because of line 32 where I just printed my name. And the second one came out because of line 33. Okay. And it just printed it out. Now, don't worry, that doesn't have 2 decimals and a $sign or whatever. We'll talk about how to do that later. All right, very good. So, awesome. I got my first program. That's pretty cool. And I just keep adding programs in and adding programs in, and we'll actually look at some of the coding of the programs I have later, but that just gives you an idea for variables as you go through and do that. And then what I would like to do again is I'd like to save this. Now remember, I can just close down Eclipse, come back next time, and it will still be in Eclipse. So it's not that I have to save it every time before I leave Eclipse. I save it if I want to send it to my teacher or if I want to, move it to some other computer or whatever it is. The question becomes when I save this, do I want this one as well? Well, I really don't. I just want this one. So if I click here and I do a file, export, okay, notice jar file's chosen because that's what I picked last time. Okay, next. Okay, and then notice it defaults to what I had before, and I'm going to call it test. Why not? Okay, so again, this is correct. If I picked it correct over here, this gets kind of messy, but it's correct there. Notice this still is correct because I used that last time, and so it does what it did before. Okay, I'm just going to change this to mod 1x. Now, if I leave it as mod 1 and I hit finish, it's going to come back and say, ooh, there's already a file named that as you go through. Okay, when you actually do that, and why am I not getting a finish there? Because I didn't, actually, notice that's gray, not blue. So if I make it blue and I really do highlight, I do file, export, jar file, next. Okay, notice the third one's picked. This is correct. This one, I'll call it mod 1x. And click finish, and I'll get another one out there on the desktop for me. And again, early on especially, test it. I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to file, I'm going to import, I'm going to import a archive. Notice that's what I imported last time, so it still does that. I picked that there, so it already filled this in, and I'm going to go to the desktop and get, there it is, right there. Finish. And notice when this comes back, okay, dwolf mod 1, notice I brought that, I brought in that one. when actually you do that. My favorite things are in there, and my first program's in there because I already had something in test that had that, if you remember. Okay, just to prove that to you. If I do a new, because I had used test in the last movie, I guess, and I do test 2, and this is what I need you to play with to begin with, because you don't want to lose stuff later on. And now if I do a file and I import next and I browse, oops, and again, see, I'm not doing this correctly because I'm too fast. Notice that's gray. I want to make sure I highlight that. File, import. You can't just make it, then you have to highlight it and tell it which one you want. Browse, DWolf Mod 1X, finish. Notice what I have in here is I end up having that, and it only has the one program in it because I clicked on here when I exported. If I clicked on here when I export, I'd get both of them. All right, hopefully that gives you a really good start into this as we go through and do that. Thanks.